So we've got three amazing presentations today. The first one is from Justin, and Justin's going to talk about the use case of Amundsen at Snap, and you will hear about why Snap chose Amundsen, how they use it, and you'll have a lot of opportunity to ask questions and comments there. The next topic after that is integration of Lineage. So we'll talk about how you can plug in your own lineage, as well as how the Amundsen community has implemented DBT lineage. And that is a talk from Verdan and Grant from Stemma. And lastly, we have taken a bunch of repositories for code that we had in Amundsen and put them together in one repo. Dorian from Stemma was the person who did all that work, and we'll share a little more about why we did that and how it impacts you. One thing that I have a request for you all is that these meetings are a lot more fun if you engage. So the best thing you can do is ask questions, share your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree with something. And the best way to go about doing that is raise your hand on Zoom. There's a button where you could do that, and I'll pass the baton on to you to ask your question at an appropriate time. So thank you for being here today. I'm going to pass it on to Justin to talk about the Snap and Amundsen.
Hey guys, give me a second. Are you guys able to see my screen at this point?
Yep.
Cool, great. Well, let me introduce myself. I'm Justin. I am a full stack web developer on the analytics engineering team at Snapchat. So I guess to preface this, I'd like to talk a little bit of like how we're actually using Amundsen first before getting into the details of like what were our problems and use cases. So we currently actually use it in a very limited manner where we are mostly building on top of the UI. We're actually not fully integrating I think the data builder and a lot of the other useful tools and integrations that Amundsen has built out, but we use it primarily for kind of a UI and kind of a system backend, but it's been really great for our current use case. So we're a little bit different, I think, than what everyone else is using it for. We actually use it for a different use case that I'll get into very shortly right now. So let's see, yep, here we go. So a while back, about a year ago, we were noticing a large problem with metrics at Snapchat. So these metrics are like kind of measuring certain aspects about our applications, and this is used throughout the company to make lots of informed decisions. But as every year was going through, we were starting to see more and more problems over time. So one of the biggest ones was the discoverability. Every year we're actually accelerating the number of metrics we're doing since we're growing at a fast pace, and the amount of users that we have and the amount of features that we're onboarding, we just continue to keep having more and more. And this makes it very difficult for anybody to know where they're at, how to actually use them. And this is also increased even more when we think about that multiple teams across Snap have different types of metrics and manage them in different ways, as well as being distributed across multiple repositories. So with this gigantic problem of discoverability, we also have even more important questions that were difficult to answer due to both this discoverability and just tracking in general. We wanted to know, like, who actually owns these types of metrics? Where are they surfaced? Like, what types of dashboards or what types of systems and interfaces are they actually integrated into? What do they mean, both from like a business perspective? So like, someone that's not an engineer, or tracking and governance, versus like technical implementation and technical details. We wanted to know meanings for both of those types of problems. We also wanted to know like what type of logic was used and where is it defined, as well as where is the data stored for these kind of metrics. That's just tracking portions. We also had difficulty in terms of maintenance as well. So some of these obstacles were, we have tons of duplicates because, again, the problem with this discoverability, some people don't even know things existed, or they don't know what's actually implemented or where to find things. So there's a lot of duplication, as well as just having things out of date, being inconsistent, incorrect, or missing, important data attached to these types of metrics. We also had issue. We also kind of have a ad hoc or not a very great way of doing metric audits and being able to easily track this. We're actually spread across doing spreadsheets and doing it in a very manual process, and being able to metadata without being like an engineer. You know, certain people in governance or just other people that like kind of keep track of this, they need more technical knowledge and like being onboarded into particular GitHub repositories or into certain systems to know this. So being able to edit that without that knowledge or without being a particular expert in that portion of our company was something that was drastically lacking. So this is where at this point we product and a few other people and a few other teams throughout Snapchat kind of got this idea to have a metric portal, a discovery and metric management portal. Its primary use case is to solve a lot of the problems I just mentioned, which is like, how do we search and find definitions? It's pretty much going to be like a metric catalog in similar ways to what Amundsen uses for data and data sets. All the relevant technical and business metadata we want for metrics should be easily discoverable and seen in a nice user-friendly format, such as like, you know, human readable names and descriptions, like ownership, tiering, which is like how important or how useful the metric is or how critical it is to the business, SQL implementation. We also want to use tagging, which I know Amundsen uses quite a lot. We want to showcase dependency and types of related metrics, like, you know, a metric depends on the implementation or the running of another, or these metrics are very related in similar ways because they track or do something very related. We also want to do something called grouping, which is kind of like being able to categorize metrics in certain ways, like, oh, these are core critical metrics versus this is team or feature related or different types of features or use sets that we have throughout Snap. Knowing, you know, sources as well as certification for governance and auditing and tracking. We wanted this to be a central location to be able to edit metric metadata as well. So solving another problem where like this distribution of problems, and then being a source of truth for metrics across the entire company to answer all of these questions. So we want to be a single one-stop shop for metrics across the company. We also intended this for being able to manage the entire life cycle, as it's going to be the central portion. One thing to keep in mind is what we actually did to implement this portal was we forked the Amundsen repo and customized the UI and models and adjusted everything to fit kind of our use cases. So it's basically a very heavily modded Amundsen repo, but with none of the data builder portions being integrated. So why did we actually choose Amundsen is a great question. So one of the major use cases is that it's pretty much an identical tech stack to what most of our current teams that were working on this project were already familiar with, which is React and Python. The UI itself was extremely close to what we intended for the application to be, like the actual interface, how people are working with it. It's primarily heavy search interface with preview and pages, like almost all those features are what we wanted. And as well as the integrations with Atlas, since it pretty much came out of the box with integrations with Atlas. Now, to get a little bit of details as to why that's important is because almost all of our data actually is stored in Atlas. We use Atlas as a primary metadata layer. The reason that was chosen is another team that's actually handling a large portion of other data cataloging throughout the company. They had chosen Atlas, and because of that, it made the most sense to pick another application that would easily integrate with Atlas. It also supported different nice display pages for tables and data sets as well, and we can customize those to our needs. Also, the nice modular system design, being able to split it across multiple services and being able to adapt and customize it was definitely some of the biggest use cases that we had for it. Again, just kind of reiterate, as well as we wanted to use the future improvements and features of the community, especially after talking with Mark. I definitely think we're gonna go forward with that in the future. So yeah, it's mostly kind of we bootstrapped it to kind of build our UI and then pretty much did a full integration with Atlas. So to kind of give a high level overview of kind of like what this system actually looks like, we we are primarily using Kubernetes pods to deploy most of our services. So the ones that are Amundsen related and are owned by my team are this one. So we pretty much deployed all of these three components as pods in themselves. They communicate with each other normally, as you've seen from other other presentations. But where we kind of divulge is where we actually integrate with an ACL system to pull permissioning, since we actually have editability on quite a bit of the metric metadata within some of these pages. We use an ACL service to be able to do the authorization portion by pulling all the permissioning for it. One thing to keep in mind is that we actually have an internal Snap security gateway layer, which is integrated with Google Login for SSO. So for internal employees to be able to access it, they have to go through this kind of gateway, and they have to be signed in with their Google credentials, and as well as be part of certain whitelist groups for that to work out fine. To get into the details of how we are actually pulling data, it's actually very straightforward. Almost all requests for either metadata or search is actually straight into Apache Atlas, which is again hosted by another team of ours. This is still all within a like Kubernetes kind of service mesh. So almost each of these are some type of a Kubernetes service that we each communicate with as kind of this microservice interaction. We decided to use the Atlas Search API because, as I said, this other team, since they're doing a large amount of data cataloging, they're already supporting a lot of the search and storage layer for us outside of this team. And instead of doing the same thing twice, which would be duplicating ingestion and duplicating search indexing, we decided to just kind of forward it to them. We're using them as a layer for that. They host most of the infrastructure to be able to support that. So almost all of it is just mostly proxying to Apache Atlas. How we actually get most of our metric data into Apache Atlas, we use Flowrider that runs daily. It's a custom library that was built by this other infrastructure team. We utilize this library to hit like kind of an ingestion service that's kind of a wrapper on top of Atlas for being able to distribute this library and have custom models that are reusable throughout the company. So with Airflow, we just kind of pull in all the definitions, we do all the logic, we configure it to be ingested and just pipe it into this service. And from there, it hits Atlas. All other data that's not ingested would be from like user interactions, since users can update like descriptions, display names, and we're going to be onboarding even more editable metadata pretty much for everything, as well as creation. This workflow is how directly from our Amundsen application is hitting that Atlas. It'll be directly on the spot for that. Cool. So for some of the challenges that we faced, Amundsen itself was actually pretty easy to onboard. Most of the code base did not have any problems. I think the only thing I found was actually maybe updating a few libraries here and there, which I don't think is a huge deal. Our major problems were actually with Atlas itself. Atlas had a lot of model limitations that made it difficult to do certain edits or to like kind of model our types that we wanted in certain ways. Maybe the biggest flag on a recent feature that I worked on, which was kind of creating a grouping mechanism. So we have like maybe a directory or hierarchy of metrics. We wanted to be able to do drag and drop editing to be able to say like which one's more important, be able to have full control over the display ranking of this. Being able to do this, we needed to do quite a bit of rework. We had to have a duplication of like having a separate field that actually had the ordering of it, because the limitation was doing atomic updates. We weren't able to edit the edges to have this like ranking feature, this ranking value. So we needed to edit one more extra field within the model to be able to store that. But at least we actually were able to get an atomic update. So the reason why that's important is so that if two people are trying to edit the same thing at the same time, there's not going to be as much overwrite, or if there's an error in case like Atlas is down, or if there's a system problem, it's not in an inconsistent broken state, which is why we really tried hard to make sure we can be able to have this atomic update. At least we were able to do it, but it was very gross to try to get it through with the current Atlas modeling. Another huge problem we really saw quite a lot is like kind of keeping relationships and data in sync, since we have both editing from a UI and from the data ingestion. There was sometimes we hit data inconsistencies where we had to go in and kind of clean up stuff. So one problem we face quite often, and we're still trying to fix it completely, is where let's say you define these metrics and they have certain computation relationships. Moving these or renaming things caused it to be in a duplicate state where they had the old version and the new version at the same time, because these were mostly relationships. We pretty much needed to detect this and delete them on the spot almost every time we did ingestion. So I don't know if anybody else has encountered something similar where you edit certain data and now the relationships are kind of out of whack. We've been needing to do extra steps to be able to kind of keep that under control. As well as we hit some issues where, again, as I mentioned, since we're both UI editing and ingestion editing, we needed to know like which ones are which and which ones are allowed. We had to do a combination of like either we seeded data from the ingestion, and then from the UI you can edit it, so then the ingestion would not override that data again. It'll only do it once on creation, versus certain fields are only for the UI versus only for ingestion. So it's like static versus dynamic fields. So we had to kind of split it to that to make sure that they don't kind of step on each other's toes. We're still kind of on a balancing act. Eventually, this maybe will probably go away once we get the full end-to-end creation and management into this portal. That way it all starts and ends in one place versus being entirely from this combination of ingestion and UI. Then we had search problems. This one is not fully finished. We have constantly had issues where we wanted relevant content to be displayed. We needed to create either custom ranking attributes or something or just something extra, where an Apache Atlas's current search API is very difficult to work with. And even though the infrastructure team that we work with is they're building on top of Atlas, but we have yet to have improvements in being able to do more direct things. We are debating and maybe moving forward with extracting out some of the search indexing, we might have to redo it ourselves so that we have more control over that, since it seems like we really can't do a lot of the customization that we were hoping for. So we're still kind of debating that portion. Also, a big limitation of Apache Atlas is being able to search by relationships. Like, let's say you wanted to search for a certain entity based on a relationship that it has, but you want to get the entities of that relationships, not the condition of the entities you're searching on. That has not yet still been implemented either. We're working on either materialized views or a caching solution to kind of like meet some of these needs, where we want to like either go through paginate based on relationship data, or we want to be able to search by that. But either way, the current search implementation in Atlas does not serve our needs for that portion. So what are we planning on working on next? We want even more metadata. We are still kind of in this kind of balancing act where we have quite a lot, but not as much as we need. And we're already having talks with other teams at Snap where they want to onboard even more metadata. So we're already kind of prioritizing auditing and surfacing health, as well as adding more like custom ability, like being able to add like your own custom types of key value pairs. So like maybe a little section for like custom attributes that you want to be able to add. Atlas already kind of has this in their UI, but we wanted to integrate it into our current application without interfering with Atlas's current UI. We want to be able to do full on end-to-end lifecycle management. So like creation, versioning, kind of, change approvals, approval process, and integrations into other systems to propagate most of this information and be able to integrate with others. We want to be able to improve the search experience. So as of right now, some people are still very confused of like, how do I find certain things? What metrics are really relevant to me? Maybe my team only cares about certain ones. And some of our plans are probably a deeper integration with some of the Amundsen's latest features. One was like a popular feature that we never actually got up and running yet, but I'd like to possibly do as well. I talked with Mark, and it looks like there's some cool machine learning abilities that the Amundsen community is working on to be able to show more relevant search criteria or relevant search entities for people. So I'd like to start learning more from the community and being able to integrate some of those features. We also want to do kind of a UI revamp, make it more simpler and easier to use. We've actually heavily modified Amundsen UI due to trying to make the look and feel be similar to other Snap components at the company. We might actually kind of take a step back and try to get closer to what Amundsen was looking at like before we made our heavy modifications. So pretty much a lot of this in the future is most likely going to be integrating more with Amundsen and actually keeping up with the community and trying to get some of the latest features in. So that actually ends my portion. Thank you very much for having me. I open it up for Q&A for anybody to ask any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Justin. Allison had a comment, so I'd love to pass the mic to her and share.
Hi, yeah, great presentation. I was just saying that when it comes to, I think you mentioned that you had a problem where your relationships like were out of whack once you made a change. I don't know if to your model or whatever, but we have like a task that cleans up like stale nodes and relationships in our Neo4j service, and that helps sometimes when like we've changed something and it doesn't work a certain way anymore to like remove those once the timestamp quote unquote expires after a certain amount of time. So I don't know.
Is this like a time to live kind of indexing?
Yeah, so we have a piece of metadata. I forget the exact name. I think it's something like created, indexed at, or whatever. And when that index at goes over a certain threshold, we just get rid of it with that task.
That's an interesting one. I think that's a great approach, and I'm probably gonna maybe propose that and see if we can try to use it. For our current use case, since we actually sync with we actually need things to be kind of correct pretty often. I don't know if like we might need that timestamp to be pretty small, but we really can't afford having duplications where like those two relationships exist when it's only supposed to be one due to our downstream dependencies. I didn't show that in our current system design. We actually have other teams in the company that use us as a source of truth. So if we have that, if they sync at that time, since they sync almost every hour due to the live actions that users can change,
yeah,
not having that correct at that time might be still very difficult. But I'd like to explore that a bit more. That's a good point. I appreciate you pointing that out. I've experienced that with MongoDB, but I didn't know Neo4j had that.
I mean, I think we wrote the task on Airflow that just checks for the
I see. So it was still more of a custom of a custom job approach, but you integrated having this kind of timestamp and just using it to know when to kind of clean up data.
Yeah, so all of our nodes and relationships have a timestamp metadata.
Nice. That's still a really good approach.
Thanks. Marius, you had a question?
Oh, yes. Am I audible?
Yep.
Cool. So thanks for the presentation. I had a question regarding and suggestion. So the question was about populating Atlas. Are you using Amundsen Atlas types or data builder, or how do you populate Atlas? Do you have some custom entity definitions?
Yes. So again, kind of going back to like Apache Atlas, it's still this application, it was forked and is maintained by another infrastructure team that we work closely with. They decided to make their own kind of ingestion service on top of it and create like a library that is going to be shared across the company that entails all the data models and all the ingestion logic. I think this was to just make it simpler and to have a reusable library. So we're currently using theirs as well as doing a lot of custom logic within like Airflow itself, we made custom logic to run within Airflow to gather up all this data and run and use their library. So the answer is no, we're not actually currently using Amundsen's Atlas integrations at all. I might want to suggest that, but as of now, I think the decision of like how Atlas is being how ingestion works with our current Atlas team is definitely on them. So it's up to their president to kind of set that. But I wouldn't mind kind of bringing it up to them and re-exploring that option to see if maybe it would be something better. Do you know if like, is it kind of out of the box and it's like easy to use, or is it more involved? Because like right now we have to do quite a lot of custom model code even with their current library. So I'm wondering if it would still be simpler than what we have right now.
So support for data builder is something on the horizon. It's a kind of legacy we want to catch up with. So there is not like integration to populate Atlas using Amundsen now. But I had a suggestion regarding the search, because you mentioned you had problems with search, and we had as well. So there is a possibility to use Elasticsearch with Atlas, and you can sync Atlas with Elasticsearch and use Elasticsearch as a search API. So just go to my comment on the chat. I have written the suggestion.
I see. So actually, yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that. The current Atlas team does use Elasticsearch as its search indexing. So like it's kind of like double proxying. We're proxying to Atlas, which is proxying to Elasticsearch. But we're just using their API, and then we're using their infrastructure since they're the ones supporting it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we are doing. We are using Elasticsearch with Atlas, but then we are creating a completely separate index to use with Amundsen.
I see. So you're using the same shared Elasticsearch infrastructure, but you're adding extra indexing on top. So like you just have some more additional integrations to meet your particular use cases. That's a good point. Yeah.
But it's a public integration, syncing Atlas with Elasticsearch. No.
Yeah, I was also wondering if we wanted to do something similar where we talk to the Elasticsearch directly from the search service rather than proxying through Atlas itself. I think that's something to re-explore as well. I think that's a good suggestion.
Thank you. I see a comment from Grant who's asking if there's a way you can share an anonymized view of the UI later on. He would really appreciate it, and I know I and many other members of the community would appreciate that too.
I think I might be able to. I just have not got. I didn't want to share that yet since I didn't necessarily get permission, full permission for that yet. So I wanted to double check before going forward with that. But I think I might be able to do something like that. Yeah. So would that be just posting it in the slides itself, or?
Yeah, you could share that with me. I could share that with the community, and we can also update the slides with that. That'd be great.
Okay, sure, no problem. I can follow up with that.
Cool. And then the last comment we have is from Minsu. Minsu, you want to share?
Just a quick comment on the last thing. I think I just think it just came top of mind on the task itself of what the staleness to delete the notes or.
Cool. Thank you. I can, that makes a lot of sense. So thanks for sharing, Minsu. All right, seems like there are no other questions. Justin, thank you again for spending time with us and sharing your use case.
Yep, thank you very much for having me.
Cool. If you have any other follow-up questions, feel free to follow up with Justin on Slack. The next up, we have our presentation on Lineage. So I'm going to pass it on to Verdan and Grant to kick that off.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those who are across the world. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see. Please stop me if you can't. So today we're going to be talking about the DBT Amundsen integration in addition to some of the initial lineage that has been created. I'm going to first jump into the DBT Amundsen mappings that we have built here at Stemma and open sourced. And as you're looking through this, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the background between the data that we're getting from DBT and how we're integrating that into Amundsen. So DBT provides a wealth of metadata as part of their process to generate the user flows or the data flows. They give information about the tables. Users can provide descriptions. They even provide lineage. You can tag assets. We've also talked to a couple of members in the community who have built custom integration on top of DBT to assign owners, and they're actually ingesting owners into Amundsen as well. We haven't built that quite yet because it's not a supported official feature of DBT as far as I know, but that's one of the items that we're certainly targeting to explore more in the next couple of months. One thing you'll notice as well is that while we did build a couple of integration with the core metadata, if you will, from DBT, there's still a plethora of different attributes and a whole wealth of information that they expose, which have not been integrated yet into Amundsen. And I think a lot of these are things we're looking for more support or more feedback from the community in terms of like, what's the right direction to take this integration. So with that, let me jump over into what it actually takes to integrate DBT into Amundsen. Here, I am just looking at the sample DBT loader that is going to now be part of the main branch. And there's really just 3 attributes that you need to pass into the configuration. There's the database name, which I'll come back to in just a moment, and then the catalog and the manifest. Now, DBT provides 2 output files whenever you run the DBT generate docs. One is the catalog, and this contains field level information, including data types, the table that it belongs to, and a couple of other attributes, whether or not it's a view, stuff like that. And then the manifest.json, which is a highly overlapping set of attributes for the tables. Plus there's additional context and metadata around tests and pretty much everything else that you would define within DBT. And so the combination of these 2 files together is what enables Amundsen to extract everything that we just looked at in the previous table. And then finally, there is the source URL, and this is going to be the link to your repo that DBT is stored in GitHub. And this allows you to just, again, integrate Amundsen so that you can jump directly into your source code for a given table or view that's created by DBT. The database name is going to be the database that generally you are using to execute this code on. So Snowflake or Postgres. We need this because DBT doesn't provide it, and we want to synchronize the keys that are created by DBT along with the original keys you already have in Amundsen from your warehouse or from your relational database. I'm going to jump into some of the code really quickly, just so we can see some more of the configurations. In the typical Amundsen fashion, there are a bunch of different ways to configure this integration of this extractor. We give a bunch of different options, whether or not you want to extract tables, descriptions, lineage. We also give the ability to import tags from DBT as badges or as tags in Amundsen. And there's slightly different use cases there, but again, giving that flexibility to the implementer. And then, of course, you can filter by a given schema. You may have dozens. Maybe you don't want to include some temporary or some staging schemas. You can apply that here as well. And that's pretty much it for the creation. The thought here is to make it as simple as possible and allow everyone to just get their integration into Amundsen as quickly as possible. If we're looking at the data within Amundsen, you can see here, we've been able to extract the description from DBT. We have all of the fields have been created. The fields have descriptions in addition to badges as well. And we should be able to see badges for individual tables. Yep. So we have those badges for the tables as well as for the columns. One thing that we did see was an upstream table. So we are extracting the lineage that's coming from DBT as well. And this is really nice because DBT has this as a byproduct of how they create views, and you reference different views and tables within DBT. And it just makes this ability to extract the data very, very simple within Amundsen. And of course, going to a particular GitHub link should take us directly to the code. Now, if I go into what does it take to actually create lineage within DBT, we did create a new table lineage model that is intended to be pretty simple with just 2 inputs. So a table key and a list of downstream dependencies. And so lineage is always going to be created one way with the upstream table and then the downstream dependencies. And these dependencies are, again, just a list of table keys. Looking at the implementation for this, specifically for the DBT extractor, we can see here for each of the tables that we receive, we're just simply passing in our key, as well as each of the downstream dependencies that are being collected from DBT. There are a couple of conversations going on in the community about how to build table lineage in a more automated fashion, doing some form of SQL parsing. If anybody is interested in that, I'm happy to coordinate them to get into that conversation as well and to make sure you're in the loop on Slack. So before I pause there and turn it over to Verdan to go into more of the lineage items, let me see if there's any initial questions or comments, thoughts. Okay. Verdan, I will hand it over to you, and I believe starting from here.
Yes, that would be nice. Thanks, Grant. So once you have everything set up using the data builder, like all the required relationship between the tables or between the columns, you are good to go to actually have the lineage on the front end. We already implemented the lineage endpoints and the queries for the Neo4j proxy in the metadata endpoints. I would not really go into the details for the queries because we are actually short on time. But yeah, it's actually merged in the main branch, so you can easily go there in the metadata repository and you can see like, hey, how the query works with the directions things. But yeah, one thing I know for sure that the lineage for Atlas proxy is a work in progress, and Mariusz is working on this thing, so which is also good. In terms of the visualization, for now at the moment, you can only see the list-based view on the table detail page. Thanks to Daniel, who actually worked on this feature and implemented this in the Amundsen thing. Yeah, so once you go into, and the next one would be the lineage graph, which is also a work in progress, but that would be on the Stemma team who is working on this thing. Grant, can you please go to the next slide? Yeah, this is how it currently looks today in terms of the lineage for table and the columns. So the left section, the left diagram is actually the table lineage. As you can see, it is like two tabs on the table detail page. One is upstream and the downstream, and the right one is the column lineage, which shows the column lineage also in the list-based view. But yeah, once you collapse the column, then you can see once you expand the column, then you can see the column lineage. And this is the current state. One of the questions that we have been receiving quite a lot, like how to enable the lineage on the front end, like even though many people are actually ingesting the lineage thing in their using the data builder or their own custom scripts in the Neo4j. The next question is how to enable this in the front end. So the next slide actually is the configuration which I took from the default configuration on the React application. There's only like one flag, which is super handy, thanks to Daniel. In-app list enable. Once you make it true and rebuild your front end, then you would be able to see the lineage on the front end in the same way, like the list-based view on the columns and the tabs for the table lineage. Yeah, this is how to enable lineage today on the Amundsen UI. And the next slide is actually what we are working on at Stemma to make the list-based view a graph-based visualization. So it will be the phased implementation. We will make sure the list-based lineage would still be in place while we're working on this feature so that we can have enough feedback or enough support or clarity on like how things would be working on the graph-based visualization without actually impacting the list-based visualization. One thing at the moment is like when you go onto the list-based view on the lineage, it only shows you the depth one of the lineage, so you won't be able to go to the nested lineage thing. So this is how the graph-based view actually resolve the problem for the users, which we have today. Yep. That's it from the lineage view. Any questions, feedback, comments?
Atul had a question on the DBT lineage, so I'm gonna pass it on to him. Atul, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so DBT metadata is constantly rebuilding because it's a very active environment. In those cases, is there a way to hook the data builder of DBT hooks, outbound hooks of completions and processes to update the metadata constantly?
Yeah, it's a really good question. At this point, no. The only way you could continue to update it would be to run a new job with the DBT extractor to push that information again.
Okay.
But it's a really interesting topic. I do like that idea.
Cool. Verdan, I had a question for you. I wanted to ask if the organization had lineage parsed in their company internally? How do they integrate that into the list view? If you could share that at a high level.
So the metadata endpoint actually requires us to have the two kinds of relationships, has upstream or has downstreams, which is required to actually make the query work. Once you have those kind of relationships, you can see all the implementation in the data builder. Or if an organization is using their own custom scripts, they can simply use the model that we have in data builder to generate the relationships with the correct namings. And this is how, and that's it. You don't really need to do anything fancy or any more customizations in order to get the lineage on the front end. And yeah, thanks for the lift teams, like for the graph visualization for the lineage.
Cool. Atul, you had another question?
Yeah, on the lineage front, Verdan. So let's say we have a lineage that we need to post from outside, like Snowflake. We have sources of data that come into Snowflake, and we want to post that lineage, which necessarily the metadata might not be in Amundsen. Does the lineage still work, or does it cross-check when you load the lineage for the source object to be present? Like the upstream object or downstream object to be present, only then you can load it in.
So if you really want to have the custom lineage within the Neo, if you are saying that you don't really have the required relationships within the Neo4j, no, it won't really work. Then you need to customize the query according to your own relationships and the nodes. But if you have, if you do have the external, like a third-party tool, which you want to like point to your table, then you can use the same configuration and then use the endpoint to actually point to that third-party tool to get the lineage view outside the Amundsen, but that won't be the native lineage within Amundsen.
Okay.
And then Marius, did you have a comment or an update on the proxy?
Yes. So I've started to work on the Atlas proxy integration with Lineage, because Atlas supports Lineage out of the box, basically. So the update was only that I have finished working on the first version. It's already working with the approach based on tabs, and I think I'm just working for the visualization part. So I already released the final version, because I saw there is a slight change in the model of table lineage. I think there is a new field there, so I just waiting until it settles down for Neo4j, and will follow with my PR, I guess.
Cool.
And this is only for proxy integration for now. I haven't thought about the data builder yet, but it would be the next step, as we are also looking into outsourcing our lineage collection to some external tool, and then probably send it to Atlas somehow.
Sounds good. Thank you for the update, Marius. Next question is from Alfred. Alfred, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah, sure. Hiya. So, like, so far everything looks great, super promising. So how I think like their lineage will be very useful for our company is around data change management. So I'm wondering if you have, like, anyone has any future plans on building a notification system where we could notify all downstream users about future changes, or any kind of changes, or even quality issues or anything. So we already have like maintainers and emails and everything like included in the table metadata. So in that sense, like, we just need the notifier.
Yeah. We had designs for notifications presented at a previous community meeting. Those designs haven't been implemented yet. I'm happy to share the link to that with you after the meeting. The way we are seeing it is like first the list view, then the graph view, and then features around notifications. And so that would be the next stage. But right now we're in the second stage of developing the graph view. It's a great idea, though.
Yeah, we missed the previous meetup, so thank you.
All right, last question is from Nirav.
Yeah. So apart from the lineage, if you can add a description as well, where we can showcase how the lineage is being built out, something like that. my parent table is loading data to the downstream table once in a month or once in a week, or particular information is coming from parent table to the downstream. So some kind of a little description also we can add it out. That could be very nice to have.
That's good feedback, and that's metadata around how often the table gets updated. That could be automated, or perhaps there are some manual curated descriptions that may be relevant to the edge as well. That makes sense. Thank you for suggesting, Ira. Cool. Seems like Atul has one.
So I want to add to what was the previous suggestion is its descriptions, frequency, or even things like process names, right? I think process names have, I think there's a feature for applications, but the description and the process name tags, if it can be done that way, would be really helpful, because one of the things is you can have multiple processes going into a single table. Lineage might differ based on that. So that's one more aspect I would definitely like to request.
That's good. Thank you. All right. Well, Grant, Verdan, thank you for presenting that. Appreciate your time. And next up is Dorian, who's going to talk about monorepoing Amundsen.
Great. So I don't have a whole lot of content to go over, very open for questions, but I'll share kind of a before and after and kind of some of the observations that led to us wanting to do this, and talk a little bit about what some of the kind of future state things that this could enable. So I'll share screen. This is kind of the before view. This is the main repo, and all of the individual services were included as individual repos that were their own GitHub. They had their own pull request system. They had their own CI, all of those sorts of things. And this has like a lot of benefits in terms of isolation, allows you to have like separate ownership between them. So there are some like really good reasons to do this, but the overall feeling that we had talking to users who were customizing Amundsen and were making specific commits to change functionality and maintaining that and trying to upstream stuff from those repos as Amundsen moved forward, as well as people who are developing on Amundsen and submitting those changes back, is that managing these repositories on a day-to-day basis was quite a bit of toil, especially whenever you get into a situation where like you have a company repo that is a fork of this, and then you have to have 5 forks of it. And then if you have individual developers who maybe have their own forks, it becomes quite a big endeavor to keep track of all of that stuff. It also makes things like making CI changes pretty challenging, where if you want to change how, say, our linter works or something like that, you're now having to submit 6 different pull requests. And so there's a little bit of stagnation in doing those things. Kind of did Verdan did a lot of work figuring out a lot of the legwork on what this would look like, and proposed a thing, got a bunch of good feedback about like how people are actually doing these deploys, how they're doing customizations, and ultimately came up with a path that is a pretty small change as a first step, where basically the thing you'll see is this is in the master repo or master branch rather. You'll see that is going to stay as it is. It's basically frozen in time for anybody that is using that old style. It gives them time to upgrade. If there's any like high vulnerability or high priority security patches, we'll submit those. Otherwise, there's no dev happening on master, and that'll be removed sometime maybe in 6 months or later. But then you go to the kind of new into the main branch, and you'll see that some of those old, like the extra packages, the non-core packages, are still other repos, and they're included as submodules, but everything else is just included in tree. And notably though, the way that Amundsen is deployed and packaged is exactly the same. So the PyPy packages if you're using PyPy packages, those are exactly the same as before, with the same versioning scheme, same names, all of that stuff. The Docker images as well are exactly the same. And the Docker compose files are also the same. The Helm chart works exactly the same. All of the artifacts that are created are the same. And so if you're a company that hasn't switched to the Monorepo yet and you do have customizations, you'll need to port those over, collapse all your other repos into a single fork of this. One of the things that this does preclude the ability to do is have custom have different versions of customizations within your repo. Previously, you could have a different version of common, front end, et cetera, within a customized repo. Now, as you upstream stuff, you'll get commits from all over the place. It's just a limitation of how this works. This migration is very nearly complete. We have moved over everything. All new PRs are going to this. We landed a couple. That's all been working quite well. The one place where we haven't quite finished up, or I haven't quite finished up, is in the automatic release process. Allison built this really cool tool that will automatically pick up changes from the individual repos, and then every month it would publish a new release with the changelog automatically integrated. There's a little bit of difficulty in doing that in a monorepo. I think we have a path forward there, but I haven't spent the time yet. So we'll be doing that in the next few weeks. If we don't get it right away, we'll do a manual release to get that out until we get the automatic thing back in place. Yeah, that's about all I have off the top, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions for Dorian? Seems like everyone loves it. That's how we take silence as. Yeah, nothing going on, Dorian.
Cool.
All right, well, thank you everyone. Thank you, Dorian, especially for presenting here your topic. Wanted to open the floor for a moment, see if there are any other questions or comments outside of the topics here. Cool. I'll start a thread on the Slack community channel, and if y'all have any questions or comments on any other topics, please feel free to ask the speakers there. We're getting some +1s from James and Grant on loving the Monorepo stuff. Cool. Well, with that, thank you again, Justin, Verdan, Grant, Dorian, for presenting today. Appreciate your time. Thank you, the community members, for attending. We will see you in a month. And if you have any suggestions or feedback on the community meeting or want to present at the next one, please do reach out to me.